And now I get to introduce our next speaker. Please come on up. Dr. Sajida. Patty? Where are you? Here she comes. So she is a very experienced OBGYN based in Washington, D.C. and New York for the past 13 years. And during her presentation, she's going to help us to learn more about her. I can't wait to hear it.
Thank you. Thank you so much for being here, and thank you to the organizers. I've been meeting more and more of them. It's the afternoon, so today we are going to begin by experiencing one of the most powerful ways to actually regenerate the gut. So I'd like everybody to stand up for a moment. Thank you, thank you, thank you. So hopefully your bellies and your intestines are feeling very nice and alive right now. I'm so lucky I get to share my life's work, cases and protocols today about regenerating the gut, using a system that basically optimizes 5 areas. And for some reason, why isn't this working? How does this work? Oh, there we go. 5 areas, which you see up here. And the idea is optimizing these areas. Over the last 18 years, I have seen so many in our practice, people coming in with really major gut issues. And it turns out that so many of them are children, and usually the major gut issues are associated with the chronic stress response. So knowing that, I went about trying to cure it, and also, of course, realizing also that gut conditions precede all other conditions, right? So when I went about trying to look at how to cure these things, I felt it was chaotic. There were too many tests, too many diets, too many supplements, too many overwhelmed patients, and it really wasn't helping with the root causes at all. So today, we're going to cover the 5-point model system to turn on innate self-healing, just like the long-living people in the blue zones. I'm also going to talk about how the chronic stress response in modern living is a major trigger for all gut issues, and 2 cases covering level 1 and level 2-3 gut protocols, first in a 17-year-old who has cystic acne, allergies, ADD, and fatigue, and in a 48-year-old nurse practitioner with IBS, GERD, and fatigue. Thousands of years ago, he said that all disease begins in the gut. Fast forward, we know that the data shows that the immune system lies in the gut, that gut inflammation precedes the brain pathology in Alzheimer's by as much as 20 years. You can actually take a gut biopsy and find the same changes you would find in the neurons in the brain 20 years earlier. It's associated with skin conditions, precedes lung conditions, and you notice I wrote causes, asthma, and it really precedes it because what you find is when you resolve the gut condition, you generally resolve all of these other conditions. So if we believe that death begins in the gut, then so does regeneration. When I started in this area, I thought that gut symptoms and conditions had to do with the gut, GERD, bloating, constipation, allergies, and then slowly realized that there's a whole host of symptoms, vaginal infections, rashes, hives, eczema, skin conditions, allergies, asthma, fatigue, autoimmunity, lupus, Parkinson's, anxiety, depression. If anybody has anything of this going on, there's a reason to address the gut inflammation because all of these things resolve when you do that. Similarly, anyone in here who is using any of these medications, every single one of these is associated with a base cause that starts in the intestines. So it's a lot broader than what we actually think. My story, I was educated in a conventional way at Georgetown and University of Maryland. I ended up doing research at National Cancer Institute and NASA, and then finally really got my real education when I went out in the field with the Safe Motherhood Project and got a chance to work in many different countries and realized that there were many ways to address root causes. So we opened up the Institute for Restorative and Regenerative Medicine, and I remained board certified as an OBGYN, and very recently got my board certification in integrative medicine, which is very exciting. But what I realized in 2003 was that the pharmacy and surgery approach wasn't necessarily curing anyone because it wasn't addressing the causes. So over 18 years and 12,000 patients in over hundreds of doctors' clinics, I'm bringing to you the basic regenerative protocols. They're basic, and this is why I call it my life experience, because any one of us that comes up here to speak, or even if you come to this conference, or anywhere you go, you're carrying all your life's experience and wisdom, and that's something that we all get to benefit from when we're in these situations. But we have, a really amazing team, some of these people that are here that helped us develop this system. The philosophy has to be to empower you to be in the driver's seat for your own health, because every person does have the ability to turn on innate self-healing and even the gift of helping others heal. It's critical to understand that it has to do with our belief. Do we believe that? Any of you seen The Biology of Belief, Bruce Lipton? Do we believe in this society that we can have an energy above 8/10 at any age? Raise your hand if you think you can. Because we can, right? We can also sleep continuous 8 hours and repair our DNA, have a great mood, not have anxiety, pain, and gastric symptoms. I list these 6 because it turns out that these 6 are clinical parameters of regeneration, and they help us to really predict what's going to show up on the labs. So I ask every patient to rate this every single visit, because if anything here is off, then the underlying things are off. We deserve to thrive. We deserve to flourish, not just survive or remain alive or continue to function or endure. And each one of us has to claim that right, because those are things that are given to us from birth. Over the 18 years, I started in hormones as an OBGYN, especially understanding that adrenal thyroid issues are present universally in everybody in modern living right now for many reasons. So you have to optimize that to over the 75th percentile. Use regenerative nutrition, detoxify, and use structured water. Oxygenate. We aren't really breathing, are we? Can everybody take a breath, conscious breath? Oxygen is 68% of our body, and water is 70%. So really, it doesn't take a medical degree, right, to know that you got to oxygenate and hydrate. How many people have drank a little bit more than 50 ounces today of water or fluid? Anybody? Okay, all right. Well, 50, that's a good number. We're going to aim for 100. And then heart-mind stress in the subconscious and conscious. I call this the 5-point model system, because if you optimize each one of these areas to the 75th percentile, the body starts to turn on innate self-healing and heal itself, which means it's not all about just filling the fuel tank of hormones and nutrients. You have to correct the chronic stress response simultaneously, as one of the other speakers was talking about. So when your phone buzzes, your nervous system fires, you use fuel. That same happens if you have an extra traffic jam, an extra event. You're always burning fuel. So instead of just putting fuel in, we got to figure out how to balance our lives, right? Using a system like that and empowering people to use those tools, we've had great resolution of many different conditions, many different diseases over time, because it's really just a baseline way of turning on our self-healing. 90% of people discontinue all of these lovely medications. And I realized when I went to a blue zone in Costa Rica, where people live above 100 years, climbing mountains, dancing, and having joyful purpose, without diseases and doctors, that there was a very special connection to each other. There was a very special life that included joyful activities regularly and influencing the 5 areas through their connection to nature. For example, they're in the sun, they're grounded to the earth, they're drinking structured water, they're oxygenating in the vibration of joy, which in our modern living society, we have to actively correct the 5 areas that we talked about, but it's absolutely possible. Over 18 years, we've developed and proved the 1, 2, 3, which I'm going to show you. They're straightforward, they're very effective. There is no need for complicated diagnosis, tests, or diets. And it addresses the chronic stress response. You always have to address the chronic stress response in order to get your gut totally healed, right? Oh, am I pressing the wrong button? I want to start with a case. So this is a kid, CB, 17 years old. He's at UCF Business School, and he came in complaining of severe cystic acne. He does not like going to doctors, let alone an OBGYN, right? Like, I've had some male patients of mine saying, oh yeah, my OBGYN is Dr. Patty. It's so funny. I think one of them is in the crowd over here. But basically, he also had everything else. Low energy, drinking Red Bull. Nowadays, that's considered to be normal, right? Born by C-section, bottle fed, planning to run a marathon in 4 months, constant cell phone use and internet use with poor focus. He's on medications for focus, which is very commonly linked to how much screen time people have. Allergies, he's on shots, and he's depressed and having anxiety. I never actually would have 20 years ago put this list together and said, oh, it's a gut issue. But that's exactly how they link back, because if you're born by C-section and bottle fed, you have a different flora. The orange, whichever way that is on the left, is extremely different from a C-section child on the right. And bottle feeding is in the middle. So you're changing the entire flora from even before birth, but most definitely at birth. And it alters your life. What about Wi-Fi and cell phone? It alters the microbiome. Within 20 minutes, you have more pathogenic bacteria and less beneficial bacteria. It also alters the skin microbiome. We know that mood is made in the gut. 70% of the neurotransmitters are made there, serotonin in the last third of the gut. And then there's all the stressors that all of us live with, right? This guy's father is a doctor, expects him to study medicine, skipped a grade. He has really successful siblings. Who knows what that's like, right? And he had no friends when I met him. He had just moved from Portland to Orlando. You can't underestimate the effect of chronic stressors on the gut, because the enteric nervous system has 600 million neurons that connect to your central nervous system, which means if you have a hyperactive nervous system, it translates directly there. And that's why a lot of people say, oh, I feel like I got butterflies in my tummy, right? But this chronic stress response is chronic gastric inflammation, and it can give you all of the symptoms that we're looking at. The ratings that he had, he rated his acne as 9 out of 10. So here's this guy with all these symptoms, and the only thing he comes in for is cystic acne. Of course, he's, not interested in having his face not look good in college. He had allergies, 7 out of 10, high anxiety, 6, 7, no energy, but those were not complaints. Where's his fuel tank? I always look at the hormones as this pyramid. The adrenals are on the bottom. Why? Because if your adrenals are off, you can guarantee yourself that everything above it is off, because the receptor sites get downregulated. So even if the numbers look fine, they're not fine. In this kid's case, he's actually above the 75th percentile for adrenals, which is great. But he does have some thyroid antibodies, and he also has some low thyroid numbers, which are going to be very relevant for his focus later on. But having thyroid antibodies simply means there is some kind of a leak, and it's usually because of a chronic stress response. We got some nutritional testing. He had an early gut pattern with very low B vitamins, which you know are made in the gut, but his glutamine was okay. And when you see the glutamine okay, you know that it's not a serious leak. Okay? In the next case, you'll see a different thing. So in this case, we measured the hormones and nutrients. The speed of the nervous system is outpacing the fuel tank. So in order to correct the acne, we have to slow down the chronic stress response. So we started him with exercises in simplifying life and breath, and we started him with a form of magnesium called magnesium taurinate, which magnesium taurinate, acetyl taurinate not only helps his adrenals, but penetrates the nervous system. So all of this is to slow the nervous system down. That's always the very first step for the gut. Very first step before you give them anything. So we did put him on gut protocol level 1 and asked him to drink 100 ounces of water. So with the Simplify Life priority exercise, I have had so many people tell me that this exercise is both life-changing and life-saving, simply because every year at New Year's time, right, we take on a few more things to do. And every time I do this exercise, if I do it twice a year, I find so many priority 3 things that I can just throw out the door. So it's very relieving. It makes room for the new you, and I call it the new you on the new earth, right? All of us have to shift. Gut protocol level 1 is really simple. 1, 2, 3. 1, no dairy, no supplements, no irritants. 2, probiotics. 3, comprehensive enzymes. Let's look at them. So A1 beta-casein, which is most cows in the United States, is highly inflammatory to the gut lining and the lung and everything else. So there's a lot of data about it. There's a lot of milk alternatives, as you know. I like to make my own. It happened by accident one night. I left some oat milk and water, and the next morning it was like oat milk. Got a cheesecloth and had some oat milk. It's pretty easy. But when you use the probiotic, we're using the critical strains of the infant microbiome, which includes all of the lactobacillus species and all of the Bacteroides species. And there's a lot of data for the use of these. The enzymes need to be able to digest fats, all the proteins, all the different carbohydrates, cellulose, and there's a lot of data to support that. So in a month, on gut protocol level 1 and a few other things, this guy had gone down to an acne level of 6 out of 10, and allergies had gone down to a 2 out of 10. So he's made some progress, little less anxiety, little better energy. At this point, I discussed gut level 2 with him. He decided that he would rather go to a more plant-based diet. We usually offer both for people who have minor situations. So we added a regenerative health coach and started to teach him a mechanism called heart math, which helps with lowering the speed of the heart rate variability so that the gut is not affected. So in 90 days of coaching, he learned how to do more veggies, how to practice the heart math, which I'm going to go through with you, and how to read labels. You know, if it doesn't sound like food, it isn't. So, you know, have you ever read on the other ingredients on food boxes and things? You can't even pronounce the stuff, so how could it possibly be food? The nervous system going from the red line to the blue line is what we're going to talk about a little later. So at 2 months on this protocol, more plant-based, his gastric symptoms are now a 2 out of 2. Anxiety's down to a 2-3, energy's up to a 6-7. He's riding along. He's actually happy. But I said, nope, you're not done, because you're still on your focus medication, right? But your anxiety is low enough that we can actually start pumping up the thyroid, and you don't have a lot of gastric symptoms. So we're going to add a multi that's specific for the adrenal thyroid, and we're going to add a little bit of thyroid. And in his case, it's going to be temporary, as you'll see. There are such a thing as essential doses and forms for activation of the adrenal thyroid axis, like certain forms and amounts of selenium, chromium, zinc, especially activated 5'B vitamins, very important. But you have to be so key. Why did we stop supplements? Because they're irritating. So if you want to go through that gut protocol, and when you're adding back supplements, use the least number, always add things for adrenal and thyroid support, biologically active, but make sure you're in veggie caps, no dyes, no fillers, no preservatives, no magnesium stearic, stearic acid, vegetable stearate. Make sure you read the other ingredient line, because that's where it's going to all be. At 4 months, he came off the gut protocol level 1. He stayed on a probiotic. He was on 30 milligrams of thyroid, and his symptoms were 0. He was ready to run away, but I didn't let him. He comes back only when he has problems now, which happens every time he has too much fun. So the anxiety was low. His energy is 8, 9, but he's still on meds. So I decided at the 4-month mark to increase his thyroid to 60 and work on EMF protection, because most of you probably know that the most sensitive organ to electromagnetic field is right here. It's the thyroid. So simple things like grounding the feet into the earth for 10 minutes daily, turning off the Wi-Fi unless it's in use, keeping phones and devices out of sleeping areas, things like that. At 6 months, he had really made life changes. He had postponed his wish to run a marathon. He wasn't on the phone as much. And of course, his energy, focus, allergies, all were corrected. He was off his meds. He was a happy camper. And we did some labs, and his leaky gut was gone, which is great. And we maintained him with a good diet, a probiotic, and a balanced life. There's nothing more important than a balanced life on this new earth. And I know all of us are working towards that, because all of us realize that life changed, right? We started to wean him off his thyroid, and he actually is not on thyroid. But you must have noticed that I didn't do food allergy testing. I didn't do GI testing, gastric testing. And why is that? Because what I found is when I did the allergy testing, which was so popular, people would come in and say, can you do this test or that test? I realized that they would end up with so much stress because they would be allergic to so many things, and then they would have to come off of this and rotate that. And really, if you just use a basic protocol to reduce the inflammation in the lining of the gut, and you do that allergy test, the allergies are gone, majority of them. The reason why they're there very often is because the mast cells in the gut are unstable. So by doing all these things and stabilizing them and getting rid of the inflammation, you've got a good system. So what are the key points in this case? A major portion of the nervous system lies in the gut, yeah. Chronic stress response or anxiety transmits to gut inflammation. You have to transform anxiety to address gut inflammation. You have to. If the symptoms correct, the underlying disease is always correct. Gut protocol level 1 is a 1, 2, 3 thing, not hard at all, right? And now I'm going on to the next case. So this is a 48-year-old nurse practitioner with 3 kids complaining of gastric issues. She, at age 30, had IBS, at age 35, GERD, and at age 40, fatigue. She also had anxiety, depression, insomnia, poor sex drive, and allergies. Very common for people to come in with few gut symptoms. Everybody comes in with something, right? But there's always a whole bunch of other things that really tell you what's going on, right? She rated her gastric symptoms at 4 to 9 out of 10. Very high anxiety, barely any energy, barely sleeping. She's waking 2 to 3 times at night. So when we look at her chronic stressors, she has had a lot of them over 10 years. And really, her father died at age 28, when she was age 28, and she got IBS at age 30. But our modern lives are full of opportunities to be either in or out of balance with nature's intention. And you look at this list of things on here, how many of you can relate to at least 2 of these things on this list, right? Everybody has something or the other going on that will affect the gut, and it'll cause gastric inflammation with the symptoms, and always eventually fatigue and anxiety, because you have poor absorption of nutrients, poor production of the B vitamins, and very low serotonin and GABA, because you're not making anything in the gut. What about her fuel tank? Her fuel tank is really interesting. Her adrenals are less than the 25th percentile. If you look at her pregnenolone and DHEA, they're both under 40. They should be above 200 in the morning, which means this process in her case has taken at least a decade. This doesn't come from, I was stressed out yesterday. This comes from a decade of a chronic sort of response to stress. And her progesterone was 0. She also had a relatively significant leak. I would say when I see thyroid antibodies, I very much think that it is a leak. But she also had a TSH of 5.8 and a vitamin D of 15. You may know that you need vitamin D to get T3 into a cell. So there was a very good reason why she was feeling so horrible, right? Her nutritional test showed an advanced gastric pattern. So not only did she have the low B vitamins, but she also had very low glutamine. So if you see a very low glutamine, you can guess that you're probably, you could also do much more complicated tests, but you don't need to. So in her case, of course, she was outpacing her fuel tank, so we started to slow her nervous system down by, again, doing the simple things. And I started her on oral progesterone at 25 milligrams and asked her to keep going up until she slept through the night. And really, oral progesterone works to slow the nervous system down in people with adrenal issues, much better than a skin form, unless they don't have an adrenal issue. We also put her on magnesium, the acetyl taurinate, and started her on gut level 1. So even though I knew in my head that she'd probably end up on gut level 3, I put her on level 1 because the more complicated and stressed people are about things, I tell people, just do a couple of things and see how it goes, right? I asked her, observe your thoughts, words, and actions. Are they in circle 1, 2, or 3? Stick it on your fridge, right? Are you putting your energy to your highest priority and good? And what about the most common nutrient deficiency in modern living? Is it any of these? B vitamins, zinc, calcium, oxygen, probably water, right? Because we lose more water when the adrenals are stressed out. But it turns out that when the nervous system is running up where you see on the top line with the blue, you're burning through magnesium faster than anything else. So I call it the magnesium miracle also because you see all of these symptoms. I never thought I'd find one nutrient that can correct all these things. But when you load people, and by load I mean get them to the point where they're having diarrhea and back them up and keep it going. Keep it going. Keep it going for 6 to 12 months. Within usually 3 to 4 weeks, these symptoms are much, much better. So it's really unbelievable how easy it is to fix some of these things if we just use some common kind of protocols, right? Magnesium is in all the synapses. And I talk about water because I call this adrenal aid, because you may know that the adrenals, when they're low, it ultimately shuts off the aldosterone mechanism. So you don't really save water and minerals, you lose them. So 100 ounces of water with pink salt and lemon for your pH, that's 3 liters. 1 liter before 12, 1 liter before 3, 1 liter by 6 p.m. So you don't pee all night, right? And you can also add other fun things to it. So gut level 1, you guys know, is no dairy, no supplements, probiotic and enzymes. And at 1 month, I follow them every month. She was on some progesterone. The most important thing she was doing is sleeping 6 continuous hours. You may know that we have many mutations every single day, and they repair in the 6th to 8th hour, the 5th sleep cycle of continuous sleep. So it is really important that we sleep all the way through the night, right? And what else was I going to say about her? Her anxiety was a little better. Energy was a 4 instead of a 204. So at this point, I added the heart math to slow the nervous system down a little more and told her to increase the progesterone. And with adrenals being low, I will go even as high as 400, 500 just to make sure that we have enough support for the adrenals, and then we'll eventually back out. And she went on to gut protocol level 2. And what exactly is that? It's mostly for a leak. It basically heals the lining, and what you're doing is adding aloe, organic aloe, Look up the data. It's unbelievable. And then glutamine, 1 to 2 grams per meal. And that's it. That's gut level 2. You noticed in the first case, they did the plant-based diet instead. You don't have to. You can do it this way, okay? Just stay away from the dairy. And because our emotions drive the nervous system, it's really important for us to watch how we respond to stress, because you might not be able to change the fact that you manage people drama, but you can definitely change the way that you respond. So a coherent heart rhythm, the blue line on the bottom, is actually healing and regenerating, whereas the top one depletes the fuel tank of hormones and nutrients. And you can shift this in about 3 minutes, which is what we're going to do at the end of this talk today. At 2 months on gut level 2 and more progesterone and magnesium, her gastric symptoms were a 2 to a 4. Her anxiety was very low, which means we can actually start her on thyroid, and her energy was a 5-7. So she does need the thyroid, and she's sleeping 8 continuous hours, so she's actually repairing her DNA. Yay. But I didn't expect her to have symptoms after 2 months of this. So you have to suspect a chronic infection. There's no other way. If it's not totally gone within 2 months, you got to think about insidious infection, hard to actually find. So we ended up putting her, it's kind of interesting, I think there's a slide missing. Okay. So we ended up at this point adding a little bit of thyroid and putting her on gut level 3. Gut protocol level 3, we added bioactive silver hydrosol. It's always when you suspect an insidious chronic infection, or RA, leaky gut, autoimmunity, tons of data on having to go after infection, but I just do it empirically. So bioactive silver, 1 tablespoon, aloe, 1 tablespoon, 30 minutes before meals. At 4 months, she had gotten rid of it. She was an easy case. Sometimes you have to continue these things. Her anxiety was a 1 to 2. Her energy was now a 7 to 9. She was on thyroid still. And I decided to bump her thyroid 1 more notch and add the multivitamin I told you about to activate everything, but you never add it before the gastric symptoms are very low. And in her case, I kept her on the level 2 with the aloe and the glutamine for about another 2 months. At 6 months, her intestinal symptoms were gone, her energy was better, she was just better. Anxiety, depression, sex drive, everything was much better. And her adrenals, it's an interesting thing to note that we never even gave her DHEA, but her DHEA went from 24 to 117 just because we gave her a little bit of progesterone and we helped her to control the nervous system in a way that would allow the adrenals to come back to life, right? So that was really awesome. And then the second thing is her thyroid antibodies did go down in half. So she's getting there, but she still has some thyroid antibodies. To maintain her, we kept her on progesterone and thyroid, kept her on her supplements, probiotics and enzymes only as needed. Because after a certain age, we really don't produce the kind of enzymes that we need to digest. So we end up having to pay attention to hydrochloric acid and enzymes. Breathing, and you can't beat balanced life. The most important thing you can ever do for your body is have a balanced life. The key take-homes here: 1, gastric inflammation equals symptoms in every organ. So if you correct the inflammation, you correct all of it. Anxiety and the chronic stress response means chronic gut inflammation. Magnesium, magnesium, magnesium. I can't say this enough. It's really critical. It's the #1 missing thing, and I like the acetyltaurinate. You can transform the heart rate variability in 3 minutes because calm heart equals calm mind equals calm gastric symptom. So you always calm the nervous system down. If you want to cure the gut, that's the first thing you do. Let's go over the protocols. All the patients are treated with the same 1, 2, 3. 95% of them will be resolved in this way. There'll be 5% left, and I have a whole accelerated regimen for them. But really, most people get off their PPI on gut level 1 within 3 to 4 weeks. And that we've seen that in thousands of people. Gut protocol level 2, another 20%, and then the last one. Level 1 is these 3, probiotic enzyme, no dairy. Level 2 is organic, aloe, and glutamine. And level 3 is mixing the silver hydrosol with the aloe. So when we look to reduce our response to stress, we reduce our use of the fuel tank. And we allow these areas to come into some kind of natural balance, which allows resolution of a lot of symptoms. And that's what I've seen. So I'd like to leave you with a little parting thought about yourself. Ask yourself, am I thriving or just surviving? Am I sleeping 8 continuous hours? Great energy, great mood, no anxiety, pain, or gastric symptoms, because I expect to thrive. That's the belief system that we need to break in order for us to all thrive. And when the symptoms correct, all the underlying disease processes also correct. To regenerate, is it about how you eat or what you eat? Where you live or how you live? Is it about what supplements you take? Ask yourself, are you closely bound to Mother Nature, closely connected to human beings, living a balanced life and experiencing joy? I would put to you that this connection to the earth and getting all 5 of these areas optimized is where epigenetic control lies. And in modern living, we have to do it more actively because we're not automatically connected that way. The best epigenetic control of your genes comes from connecting to nature. Not necessarily with this extreme, but there are other ways, such as if any of you has ever buried your feet and felt the heartbeat of the earth, you will know that Mother Nature can heal you. I don't know if any of you have ever actually buried yourself that far that you can feel the beat, 7.83 hertz. It's the same exact hertz as your heart and your brain. That's why it feels so good. And that's why all these little animals like to hang out in nature. So any opportunity to get, whether you're in a city and you see a little piece of grass or you see a little tree, touch it, connect, think it, always connect yourself into nature. And if it's not possible to do it necessarily in an actual way, I want to show you the heart math exercise that takes you from the red line to the blue line. So put down whatever you're doing and imagine yourself right now in this virtual experience. For the virtual experience, you are currently surrounded 360 degrees in this place. You're standing by the flowers. Breathe in and out. Put your hand over your heart, imagining the air entering and exiting your heart. Feel the colors, the sounds, the aroma, the birds, the breeze on your skin, the taste of your surroundings. You are now on the blue line. I have so much gratitude for all the work that you do to help humanity every day. Thank you so much.